What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Daily Rage Quit. I'm your host, Weiss, and alongside me, as always, the one, the only, Steelman.
How y'all doing tonight?
And guess what, everyone? Of course, today's episode, we have to go over the new State of Play from PlayStation, The Last of Us Part 2. Probably the last video we're going to get from Naughty Dog before the launch that showcased some new gameplay and some new story features from the VP of Naughty Dog, which, by the way, Stillman, super cool. The VP of Naughty Dog coming in and actually having this conversation with the millions of players out there.
Yeah, pretty cool. I'm glad they did it that way. He seemed to have his plan well rehearsed and did a good job.
And just another marketing success. And the things that we're going to talk about today, because there was so much, the big things that stood out the most, one, we're going to talk about locale and talk about where everything's taking place. The second thing we're going to talk about is about environmental verticality. We're going to talk about factions. Steelman's got tons of notes on that. And then finally, we're going to talk about the new gameplay and just from a high level, what we saw and our reactions to it. So let's jump right into it and let's get into locale. So, as we're going through this demo and as we're going through the walkthrough, we found out that there are two major points in the game of where this is all going to take place. The first one is in Jackson, Wyoming, which, by the way, if you get a chance while you're watching this, pause, go into Google, type in the actual location, Jackson, Wyoming, and look at the photo and then compare it to the photo imaging from the actual demo reel itself. What you'll see is almost identical from real life from that photo that you found on Google to what it is in the game. It's incredible. But the other location, and this is probably where everything's going to take place, is in Seattle, Washington, which this is supposed to be Naughty Dog's biggest environmental build they've done on any of their IPs. So think about it. In all the Uncharted series, you think those levels were huge? This seems to be the biggest one they built. And as you look at it closer and closer, the amount of detail that's being put into this overgrown natural landscape of Seattle, this hustle bustle city that turned into an oasis all of a sudden, this is going to be insane. I'm really excited to explore this city, to actually see what elements of Seattle they truly pulled from. And you caught it a little bit from the water lines there, and you could see when there was a storm and stuff like that, and the Ferris wheels in the background. You could see some of the elements of Seattle there. I want to see it all, though, and I'm super stoked about it. And with that scale, who knows how big it is, but we found a lot of things that are going to tell us how big it is. I think Steelman's got a couple of things that he noticed right off the bat about scale.
Yeah, I think when you get the scale that we have here, you have to add horses and cars and things like that to get people around. In this case, they went with boats and horses, it seems, to kind of traverse the terrain. I guess I have some questions as to how they're going to work. I don't know if they'll be used in combat, or I don't know if they'll be used, just to get around. And it's, you're out of combat, and they're kind of used during the lulls in the game to kind of just pass the time better. You weren't able to have combat on horse in the first one, so I don't know what they'll do in this one. I'm curious to see how those will be used, but it's interesting that they've decided to add those two types of vehicles. And we saw a car in one, whether or not you'll be driving a car or if it's just in a car in one of the trailers, yet to be determined. But it's interesting that they felt the need to add these because the world has apparently grown larger, and they need something to help them get around. It's we'll see how it's implemented, though.
It looks beautiful. I think one of the cool things to add to that environmental impact as well is they're showcasing 4 different seasons of weather within the game. You saw from the previous trailers and even from the new gameplay that's playing right now, we have snow, we have the gloomy day, but then we also got to see a storm, and the storm actually looked really cool on the water side. What did you think about it, Steelman?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty neat. I'm curious to see if the weather is dynamic and like constantly changing, or it's just like when you get to certain points, the weather changes. They mentioned seasons, which is obviously pretty cool. It's something that was in all The Last of Us too. That's how they broke up the chapter. Last of Us 1, they broke up the chapters with seasons. They had fall and winter and summer and all that. So I mean, I don't know. One thing I do think is cool about the seasons is it changes some of the dynamics of the game and how you play it. But whether or not they'll, I'm really curious about one thing in particular, and that's specifically how snow will impact it. I mean, you have dogs already that are able to track your scent. And you have a scent trail that the character shows behind them that you have to be paying attention to, because a dog can track you down if you're not moving fast enough and you don't get away from it. But will human players be able to track your footsteps in
Ooh,
whether
yeah.
like rainy weather or muddy weather or snow? Where snow would be an obvious one. You'd think that they would, if they're able to track you with dogs. You'd think that they'd see footsteps and be like, "Hey, what is this?" So I don't know. They didn't mention that either. That's a question that I would love to ask them and love to know and see what happens. But we'll see. I know that there will be snow impact. There was snow impact in one of the other trailers where you step and there's footprints. So whether or not it'll be more than that, we'll see.
Nice. Now, the next part that we have to talk about is environmental verticality.
Mm.
Stanley, tell me if I'm wrong here, but did you get a sense of Uncharted when you saw Ellie jumping and using the new rope mechanic?
Yeah, like you said it to me, and I already had that epiphany where I was like, man, I've seen this before. And then you were like, yeah, it was straight out of Uncharted. Didn't you see that? And I was like, fuck, yeah, that's it. That's out of Uncharted for sure. And I watched it the second time, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely what's Nathan Drake swinging from a rope. They just made him smaller and into a woman, and that's, you know, but it's cool to see this. I think it's a cool dynamic to add to a game. You have her ability to, and you also saw enemies that are carrying ropes. So I'm sure ropes are going to be pickup items. I'm not sure if they'll be used that you could reuse them, or if you have to leave them behind. I'm assuming in some instances you'll have to leave them behind. And choose whether or not you're going to use or have a rope. Maybe if you don't have a rope, you can't go about it that way, or you can't get to the secret place where there's a ton of stash of supplies if you don't have a
Ooh, yeah.
rope on you. Which is a similar problem in the first Last of Us. If you weren't able to make a shiv, sometimes you couldn't open secret doors to get gear if you didn't have this stuff to make a shiv to open the door. So I'd be curious to see if they do that with ropes this time. And then the other part is that this verticality adds to the open world. It makes the game less linear. If you have paths that you can go above enemies and below them and around them as well, like that really opens up the game a lot, and you can kind of just get creative with how you want to play this. If you want to play it stealth or guns blazing, either way, you have the option to go up, down, or sideways. So it's awesome to see this. And yeah, I love the rope mechanic. I think that's creative new thing that'll bring a lot of versatility to the game.
There's something that, if anything, you could trust Naughty Dog on rope mechanics. I mean, when you're swinging around Nathan Drake and you're climbing ropes, going down ropes, swing from ropes, I just hope it doesn't become the same exact thing. But I trust Naughty Dog's going to build the right mechanics around it. You could see it, even when she was jumping, you felt the same exact motion. And I'm actually totally okay with this, because their Nathan, the Uncharted series was brilliant. This is a totally different series, but it's okay to implement a new mechanic in there that might make it a little bit easier for them to build, but still give it its own element. It still has its own feel. One thing I was thinking about, Steelman, this is what's really cool. So we talk about traps, right, and crafting traps. Imagine like you can craft a rope to a tree, and you can, as enemies are walking closer to you, it grabs them by the leg and rips them up in the air, and you can run up and stab them so that's taken out. Like
That
that
would
would
be
be something
awesome.
cool. Or even like just making like tripwire almost. I don't know. There's
Yeah.
sort of trap mechanic to it that would be totally killer. So Naughty Dog, if you're listening to this, like That's the mechanic you need.
It's too late at this point, but yeah, I agree. That would be kind of cool to set up tripwires and stuff like that with ropes. If making rope a crafting material is a thing, we don't know.
Or just thought about it again, a weapon, and you're just choking somebody out as you're going up towards them. You just go up behind them and you just like wrap the rope
Yeah,
around and like kind of take them out in a different stealthy manner. I don't know.
pull them
There's
over
just
your back.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's
Be
just so many
shorter.
different things there. It's insane, and the mechanic's super cool. And Steelman are extraordinarily excited to play with those particular elements. And like they said, you could be stealthy with it or not. The other thing we have to talk about, this was a huge one and a big reveal, is we learned about two factions, and then we also got a teaser to a new creature that's a part of the infected, and we have to talk about all three. So I'm gonna let Steelman rifle through, getting through the classes without down these factions. Go for it, brother.
Yeah, man. So they introduced two new factions. One being the WLF, the Washington Liberation Front, which is a highly trained militia. They're organized, they're well equipped. They occupy most of the city after liberating it from the military forces. These guys seem like your run-of-the-mill military guys. And then there's the Seraphites, or the Scars. They're the religious zealots that are tribalistic, stealthy, territorial, and they have created self-inflicted wounds on their face, and no one knows really why they do that. Sounds painful. Not something I would prefer to do. But yeah, these guys seem like the creepier guys. They are using more silent weapons. They don't seem as heavily armed, but seem just as dangerous. And they're a little bit crazy too, which you see them in the trailer breaking people's bones, cutting people open, disemboweling somebody. I mean, yeah, these people seem like the nightmare fuel of the game. Besides the other, the infected that you have, which is the third faction, and then you brought up. And it's interesting to see that, you get the same baddies from the Last of Us. You get the bloaters, the runners, the clickers. They're all there. But yeah, they've added some other bad guys to the arsenal. Yeah, one of them is not, they're not telling us about, and it sounds terrifying. As we pointed out at the end there, that was a little scary. I'm curious to hear what people's guesses are as to what this creature would be. Weiss and I had a couple of ideas as to what they are. I'll let him share those, but we're excited to see what this thing is. It sounds big, that's what for sure.
There's no doubt in my mind this thing is gigantic. So when they, right before they cut to the gameplay clip, they play an audio clip of that creature being pretty close to you. If you got really good headphones, you can really hear the vibrato, you can hear the echo, and the depth of its voice. So this thing has to be gigantic. First thing that came to mind to me right away is an infected bear. This thing is like gigantic. Yeah. Its face just explodes with like just an insane look on it. I don't even know what it could be, but like I'm imagining something as big as a bear that is totally annihilating everything. It has no boundaries, and it's just this big brutal monster that's like a big boss. I imagine just being a huge boss. Like it's gonna be nuts. It's got to be something like a bear, or I can't even think of anything that could be bigger, honestly.
No, I mean, yeah, and it makes sense too. I mean, grizzly bears are known for being in Wyoming.
There we go.
Washington as well. So like, this is not far fetched, guys. Like we could see a giant infected bear that has like big plates of armor on it, that its head's all messed up and it's running. That would be terrifying. I would cry.
You know, it'd be really disappointing. A terrifying moose.
Oh dear.
All of a sudden we're all just like, oh. But I don't think they would do that to us. They wouldn't leave you kind of guessing after you hear the audio clip and you get something like a turtle. That would be the worst thing on the planet.
It's a bullfrog.
Now, one of the last things we have to talk about here as we close up shop, guys, of course, is the new gameplay just in general. And let's just give it what it is. It's fucking insane. That was intense. So it drove emotion. The fluidity was out of control, and they went gun blazing in it. So, I mean, crafting in 30 seconds, not even in 30 seconds, in 3 seconds, all these different mechanics, from Molotov cocktails to gas explosives and going in and killing people left and right. This was gory. This could potentially be more of that terrifying gore feel that you get in traditional horror films, which is really exciting. It kind of reminds me, Steelman, of, you ever seen the movie Touristas?
I don't think so, no.
So this is what happens, and this is the quick and dirty. It's a dude who harvests black market internal organs, and there's a scene specifically where there's a friend. It's hilarious because they're all on vacation. They get caught. There's a person watching the doctor work on their friend, and as he's talking to that person, he's removing all the organs. You get this sick feeling in your stomach because you're like, whoa, this is like insane. The brutality and gore in the gameplay was just outrageous, and it felt good in a really horrible way.
Yeah, I agree, man. Like, Last of Us wasn't big on gore. I mean, there was definitely some gore in it, but it wasn't like realistic gore like this. This looks very realistic. I remember one of the previous trailers, like I said, a guy getting disemboweled, and you just seeing their intestines coming out. So, I mean, it was pretty gruesome in that way. I mean, I've seen pretty much everything in this one. I mean, the gore looked so realistic. I mean, you had people getting sliced by a knife. You had blood spilled onto the floor when the fight continues. People stabbed in the throat and choking and coughing on their own blood as they die. People bleeding from their wounds, like a lot, like just blood squirting out of their necks as they've gotten stabbed in the neck. But also, I mean, I saw gash marks on enemies that were hit by machetes, convulsions before dying, assuming people were going into shock from dying. I mean, like, just realistic levels of combat, blood, gore, on all levels. It's exciting to watch. I'm happy that they've gone this route, made it look realistic, and it also seems very personal. Which makes it different. It's, when you get a Battlefield game, you get impersonal gore, you're shooting people from a distance. This one is right up in your face. You're watching you kill these people. And they said they wanted to do that, and I think that point was made.
Excellent. Well, y'all, thank you very much for tuning in to the Daily Rage Quit, an episode on the state of play, The Last of Us Part 2, gameplay demo, and walkthrough from the VP of Naughty Dog. Now, of course, be sure to subscribe, like or dislike, because we need to know if you really like our shit or not. And of course, keep the conversation, comment down below. Let us know your thoughts on the game, on the gore, and of course, people drowning in their blood as they're falling to the ground. But from the Daily Rage Quit, peace.
Today was a good day.